Good morning. From Ephesians chapter 4, Paul writes, I encourage you to live as people worthy of the call that you have received from God. Conduct yourselves with all humility, gentleness, and patience. Accept each other with love and make an effort to preserve the unity of the Spirit with the peace that binds you all together. You are one body and one Spirit, just as God also called you into one hope. There is one Lord, one faith, one baptism, and one God of all, who is over all, through all, and in all. Word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God. Will you pray with me? Gracious God, we ask you to quiet our minds and hearts so that we may concentrate for these few minutes on you. Help us to be attentive to your Spirit. Help us to open our minds and open our ears that we may hear what you would have to say to us. Be with us in our speaking and in our thinking. In Christ's name. Amen. For all the years that I have served in pastoral ministry, I have received annually a programmatic calendar from the United Methodist Church. It used to be free. Now it's not. It's actually quite a helpful tool, particularly in planning and preparing for the worship life of a congregation. Every year when I receive that calendar, I pray over it regularly. I reflect carefully about the topics that are either liturgically or spiritually appropriate for the congregation that I am serving as we move systematically through the year. It's no accident that the liturgical season called Epiphany celebrates the coming of Christ as the light of the world. And yet, the 8 weeks of Epiphany, that time between January 6th and Ash Wednesday, also creates some spiritual anxiety within the thoughtful Christian about how the light of Christ affects our lives. So allow me to pose a few questions. Questions that are based on our journey so far in 2017. Does the light of Christ shine brightly by illuminating our spiritual path as we move into a new year with all of its potential challenges and opportunities? Does the light of Christ reignite the light that has been lit within us at our baptism and as we remember our baptism? Does the light of Christ instruct and empower us in how we are to live in a multicultural world where we walk hand in hand with other spiritual sojourners, regardless of race or ethnicity or education or socioeconomic status or sexual orientation? Does the example and message of Martin Luther King Jr. resonate in our bones so that the model becomes our genuine welcome to all people to be part of our community of faith? Does the light of Christ shine brightly enough for us to overcome our prejudices as well as our differences of opinion? You see, those are the questions that keep us searching for the results of Christmas. And there is an effect. There is a byproduct of the coming of Christ. What does it mean, practically, for God to come to us and abide with us? Now, to complicate things a little more, there's a date that has been included on my program calendar for years and years. Most pastors don't really know quite what to do with it. It's called Ecumenical Sunday. It's the Sunday that sits right in the middle of a Wednesday to Wednesday week called a week of prayer for Christian unity. That's today. Now, I have always been a pastor committed to ecumenism. I'm not in to tribalism. I learned a long time ago that diversity within the Christian faith is actually one of our strengths. It is not a weakness. But we seldom treat diversity as though it's a strength. You see, I am enriched as a person of faith and as a Christian minister when I engage in conversation or fellowship with people who have other Christian perspectives that are different than mine. I am enriched when I engage with people from other faith traditions. So celebrating ecumenism is no stretch for me. And yet linking ecumenism with Christian unity provides probably a challenge for everybody who's sitting in this room. You see, based on the calendar, we are to pray. And pray for 7 days for Christian unity. As those 7 days of prayer is going to make it happen. So I ask you, has it yet? Are we unified? Does 7 days of prayer annually actually bring about Christian unity? At least by the calendar, we United Methodists have been praying for it for a good many years. Are we united yet? For heaven's sake, we can't seem to even be united within the United Methodist Church, let alone all of the Christian tradition. Probably all of you, just like me, have heard a whole lot of talk this past week about our need for unity in our country. Now, I find that fascinating. In the midst of one of the most chaotic political and cultural seasons that we have ever experienced, there are voices clamoring for unity. We're not united. So I have to tell you, I've had to work really hard on this message without sounding critical or cavalier or cynical. In our culture, we focus incessantly on bad news, not good news. We focus on the problem, not the solution. We focus on all of our disagreements far more than we spend our time and energy discovering and building on those things that we can agree upon. In our extraordinary competitive culture, we have been taught from a very early age that there are winners and there are losers and there is nothing in between. Working to achieve greater understanding of our human diversity or to gain a richer perspective on what is unfamiliar or unknown to us is like asking us to learn a brand new language. But wouldn't it be wonderful? Wouldn't it be wonderful if we worked as diligently on listening deeply to one another and sharing openly about our fundamental values and beliefs and learning the art of compromise as much as we focus on our divisions and our threats to separate? You see, all of that and more comes to light when we think about this complex and rather evasive topic called unity. Now, I want you to pay attention to this next statement, otherwise you're going to miss the point of the entire message. Christian unity is an unavoidable goal for a follower of Jesus. Christian unity is an unavoidable goal for a follower of Jesus. Now allow me to give you a rather simple example. Regardless of which way I travel in driving from our home to First Church, I pass at least 12 Christian congregations. At least 12. There's a Lutheran church right down at the end of our street. There are 2 Roman Catholic churches on the way here. There are, who knows, half a dozen Baptist churches, an Episcopalian church, several Christian Reformed churches, a Presbyterian church, a United Church of Christ congregation, an Evangelical Community Church, a Pentecostal church, and even one more, United Methodist Church. And at the heart of it, all of those Christian churches that I pass on the way to First Church have more in common than we have in our differences. And yet we don't focus on our commonalities. We focus on our differences. We focus on our differences about theology. We argue about whether we're Calvinist or Arminian or something else. We have our differences in our sacramental understandings and practices. We have differences in our styles of worship. We have differences in our concepts about God's grace and whether it is freely offered or whether it's earned by doing good works. We focus on our differences about the role and function of the ordained and whether they're going to be called or whether they're going to be appointed. We often differ on how we're going to interpret lay ministry or the role of women in leadership or what form of congregational government we're going to follow. And sometimes we even differ about what we call sin and forgiveness and whether we are going to be fully inclusive or not. And it wears me out. To be sure, friends, to be sure, there are differences within the Christian community, which is exactly why we have so many congregations and denominations. Historically, human beings have not been so good at articulating our differences while valuing a relationship enough to work through those differences to build bridges that can unite island to island in those troubled seas of misunderstanding. So hear me clearly. Unity does not ignore or minimize differences. unity emerges as conflicts are named and understood while honoring a person or a group of persons who have a different point of view. Unity comes when we hold our values and our thoughts and our beliefs and practices while honoring another person who has a different perspective on those very same values and thoughts and beliefs and practices. According to the Gospel of John, Jesus prayed for his followers to be one. Let that soak in. Jesus prayed for them to be one. It was important to Jesus for his disciples to be unified so that the world could see and experience the love of God modeled in and among the faithful. Jesus was casting a vision for a different kind of world. He was casting a vision that ought to be held as a fundamental priority for every Christian person. It's the hope of the ages, regardless of how difficult it is to accomplish. Yes, indeed, we do need to pray for unity. But we also need to do more than pray. We have to work at it. We have to plant seeds of unity. When I hear the biblical mandate to seek and desire unity, I process it through my experience as a musician, particularly a conductor. There are some people who think that unison singing or playing is easy, when in fact to sing or play in unison is probably the most difficult of all music making. In unison singing, every flaw is heard. When someone in the ensemble is off pitch and you're singing unison, you can hear the one voice that's out of tune. In unison singing, every flaw is heard. When a vowel is not formed accurately or a consonant is not closed properly and precisely, or a crescendo or a decrescendo is not observed, or a breath is taken in the middle of a phrase, even by one person, it's discernible. So it is with Christian unity. You see, the church has a song to sing. But the song we are singing must be sung as though it is one voice. And when there's something awry, it's discernible. That's why Paul's instruction is so important to us. So important. Conduct yourselves with all humility, gentleness, and patience, he wrote. Accept each other with love. Now here's the phrase. Here it is. And make an effort. And make an effort to preserve the unity of the Spirit which binds you together in love. Work at it. Do something about it. Do something to generate unity within the body of Christ. As important as it is to pray for Christian unity, and it is important to pray, it's not enough. As Christians, we must enter difficult conversations with great care and love. We must listen to others. We must value them and their perspectives as much as we value our own. We must find common ground with a willingness to compromise and adjust. So make the effort. Make the effort. Because in making the effort, we are giving the opportunity for the Spirit to work beyond our human effort, so that we can become one in Jesus Christ. Here is the truth. If we are to have any influence at all as Christian people in the world, it is accomplished best when we are united. Thanks be to God. Amen. Thank you for being with us this morning. We trust that God has spoken to you through something that has occurred in these last 60 minutes. Unity. It's not a light subject, is it? It's very difficult. As my wife and I were talking yesterday, it affects how we are in our families. It affects how we are in our workplace. It affects how we are in our churches. It affects how we are in our communities. It affects how we are in our denomination. It affects every part of our human experience. So don't be guilty of praying for it for 7 days. Pray for it all the time. And pray that God can use you. Use you as a seed that can be planted in your sphere of influence, so that Christ can, and Christ's image and Christ's vision can be fulfilled, that we may all be one. Thanks be to God.